Work on the cult continues. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Glacial Geek Deep Thoughts Thin Coats with me, Phil the Glacial Geek. Today I am going to be working on my acolyte hybrids that I've been working on previously with the hand flamers, trying to get a bunch of these guys together because I think the combination of them and the other guys without them are going to be a strong combo, working out these guys hopefully dropping into clear screens, the other guys trying to drop into to just punch things in the face it was what I envisioned in my head. So that's the idea of wanting to work with them that way, and I think it's going to be pretty strong and effective. So we'll have to see how it all turns out. I've been working on these guys. These are the same ones I was working on last time. So, like I said, I primed them with the blue, and it's working out really well. I'm really happy so far. I haven't put any washes on, obviously, because I'm still working on putting down the base coat colors here. But I've been working on it. Today I'm going to be working with leather brown, painting the pouches and the belts and whatnot on these guys and trying to get them up and going. I'm painting a lot of these guys, so I'm trying to get through them and try to get them painted up. They kind of went to the wayside a bit because I was painting up my Knight Valiant that my brother got me for Christmas that I'm super, super stoked how it turned out. So check that out. I've got it on pictures on Instagram if you want to go check them out. The Glacial Geek on there, and it came out really awesome. I did the first time doing some freehand of my own. I did flame effects, like painted flames on the shoulder pad of the knight, and my wife painted on the logos on the legs. So it looks really awesome. I'm really stoked how it came out. The color scheme looks really cool, and I'm really, really happy and excited with how it turned out. So check it out. Very cool stuff. I didn't film me paint that because I didn't know how they were going to turn out when I started, but I'm happy how they turned out in the end once I got it taken care of. So that's what I'm going to be working on, painting these guys up, because I've got a tournament coming up. I've got Warzone Gigabytes coming up in a bit, and I've got to make a list for them, and I think these guys are probably going to be part of it. But that kind of gets me to where what I'm going to be talking about today, which is where do the Genestealer Cult sit competitively right now in the meta and whatever's going on. This is coming off of a pretty big event in Genestealer Cult competitive history right now, is that Juice managed to take them to top table at Adepticon and did very, very well with them. So I think that it kind of shows that they are competitive and they can be competitive. And his list was purely Genestealer Cult, didn't have Astra Militarum allies. And it should be interesting to see how they develop going forward. But I would like to kind of take this episode to kind of talk about where I see them sitting right now and how they fit in with all of the new things that have been coming out, and where I see a lot of different lists that are coming up and what they can do. And it kind of comes at a point now where people have had the book for a bit, and I think it's tough. It's tough. You look at the book. There's no easy answer. It's not like you've got there's no thing that absolutely has to come with every list. Because I've seen people say that you have to just spam, Brood Brothers units that are getting orders from Tempesters that are dropping in. You've got to spam acolytes. You've got to have what are they? The Valkyries that are coming in to support them with the Astra Militarum Brood Brothers detachments, and there's all these different strategies that you can use, and they're all super effective when they work. But it's trying to put it all together. There's no answer. There's no absolute answer right now for what is competitive for Genestealer Cult, and I think it's thrown a lot of people. I think there's a lot of people out there who are saying that Genestealer Cult, maybe they aren't as strong as we first thought when it first came out, because there are some things in there that really catch people's eyes, like mental onslaught, being able to do what it does super effectively. And yeah, it does work when it works. But the problem is, like with any specific psychic power, it becomes hard to be consistent with it when you've only got one of them that can cast, and you've got no way to give you pluses to the rolls for it to go off. And afterwards, you're also dependent upon the results of rolls that happen after that. So you can build and you can help to enhance its ability to work. You can buff up the leadership of a patriarch that's going to be using it. But at the end of the day, it's only going to work very well against particular armies. So if your whole idea is to buff up your army so it can use mental onslaught, and you run into a horde of chaos demons, good job. You pop a single demon, and the 500 others that he has in the list come up and just punch you in the face. And I think that's what it comes down to, is that there's a lot of these things that work very well for specific units, and they require a lot of work to make them happen. Either a lot of CP, or they require a lot of planning. They require a lot of dice rolls to go your way, and that becomes hard to develop an army and a list that can handle all the different armies out there in the meta. So, for instance, you go up against a knight. Yes, mental onslaught's going to be super effective. You have a really buffed up unit of acolytes there with an icon and an icon ward, and they're taking it from the the vigilist detachment, so they've got +1 to wound, and they can probably take down a knight. But at the same time, all of those things that are helpful on that are not going to be helpful against a squad of 30 plague bearers that all have an invul save, that don't care about what you're wounding them on, and that they can just try to just outlast you, and they're a lot tougher to take down than you are. All of these Genestealer Cult units, they're tough 3, most of them, and you're left there with a situation where it's like they're just made of just wet tissue paper, that they just die when the enemy just looks at them wrong, let alone sends like a fusillade of a whole bunch of bolters their way. They go down really quick, and they die super fast and super easily. And when that happens, you're left in a situation where you very quickly lose any kind of bite that your list has. And you have to be able to hit strong, you need to be able to hit fast, and there's ways to handle all these different armies that are out there, but it becomes hard to have them all be able to work in the same list. So for instance, Juice's list had some really interesting units. Like, he had 2 20-man acolyte squads with 8 rock saws in each. Super strong that they can drop in, and he was using them to be able to drop in late turn to pop them back up into reserve, so we can pop them down onto late turn objective holding. And if they get down, they're properly buffed, and they charge in, there's nothing that they can't kill, honestly. As long as you do it properly, as long as you can make and find the holes to drop them into it, they're going to be able to do what they need to do. And that could be super effective and super strong for these, for your army. He also had a 10-man bike squad with 2 of the wolf, the quads with the demo charges, so that he could drop them in within 3 inches, spend this, but he was spending like 5 CP per time that he was using these guys. So he would drop them in, spend the 2 CP to have them 3 inches away from the target, spend the 3 CP to allow them to shoot like it's the shooting phase, throwing 5 of his demo charges, and then in the shooting phase throwing the other 5 demo charges. And that could be super devastating, but it's a super glass hammer, and it's pretty expensive points wise to get them all in there, because you've got, what is that? That's 10. You're looking at 10, that's 50 points alone in demo charges, and you've got these guys, and again, they die like they're just like nothing. They've got the same toughness as a regular Marine. So imagine a regular Marine getting shot with less armor. That's basically what you've got with those bikes. So they die pretty quickly, and they die pretty easily. So a lot of what you have here is it has to do a job, and has to do it fast and effectively, and then die, and then you have to try to hold on for the rest of it. And that's how the list works, is that they are able to get to where they are, just keep constant pressure on your opponent, and then at the end try to outlast the army by the end of it you have like 3 models left on the table, but you've managed to get enough points that you win, and you've outlasted the fact that they couldn't table you quick enough to keep you from scoring the points that you needed. So it's tough to plan for all of that. But looking at all of the lists that are kind of in the meta, you've got horde lists, you've got knights, you've got you've got knights, you got horde lists, you've got Eldar. All of these different lists that you have there, Genestealer Cult have answers for most of them. It has answers to every army, not necessarily every single list. Flyer heavy lists are difficult for Genestealer Cult because we don't have flyers. And Mental Onslaught, like I said, is only going to be able to handle one per turn, if you're lucky to be able to pop that off. You've got very little else that's really going to be super effective against flyers. Even throwing all those demo charges into a flyer is not necessarily going to win you the day. And it becomes difficult to try to plan for all of these guys to work properly together because of all of these different various issues that you would have. So looking at what's going on in the meta and looking at what the Genestealer Cult have, I would say that there are answers and there are ways to make it work. What it is not necessarily clear right now. Juice's list was super strong, but he ran into a pretty strong demon list at the end there that was very effective against him. It was able to beat him. And you look at what they have and the number of models that you have there, and it's possible. Don't get me wrong; it's possible to effectively handle them, but at the same time, it's not guaranteed. And I think that's where a lot of it you have trouble. Where a lot of other lists are pretty solid as long as the dice do what they're supposed to. With the Genestealer Cult, it takes a lot of thinking, and they're a super thinking man's army is what I think it comes down to, because there's no just point and shoot. It's not like a Castellan that you just plop in your back table edge, you surround them with your guard, and then you just point and delete units. Genestealer Cult, you need to keep an eye on how the table's panning out, what turn it is, how much time is left in the game, where the objectives are, where your opponent's moving, so that see where you have space to get your units in. You need to be able to keep in mind what your CP levels are at to know what you can do in response to different things. You have to figure out timing of when you bring in units, when you don't bring in units, when you spend different stratagems on what units do you spend those stratagems. Even at enlist creation, it's like how much buff is too much buff, how much buff is not enough buff for the different things that you're trying to do. And at the end of the day, it becomes very difficult to keep it all straight. And it becomes very difficult, especially at the end of a long day after you've been playing for, by the time you get to round 3, 4, 5, 6 in a tournament, it becomes very easy to start to forget about things, and it becomes very easy to start overlooking things and getting caught up. And as much as it's easy to get some, multiple brigades or battalions, whatever it is, to get your CP, the armies are very CP heavy because they depend a lot on what is specifically Genestealer Cult to work. You've got the 3 CP that's going to be used very often to allow you to move D6 so you can get off a better charge, or to shoot if you want to shoot, like I said, with the throwing the demo charges. And at that point, you're looking at 5 CP for one unit and one turn. That's a lot of CP to be dropping down there. That's even more CP than you're dropping with knights, trying to drop them in there with that 3 CP for the reroll, and then you've got rotating ion shields. So you're looking at knight levels of CP usage without necessarily the staying power and the effectiveness of knights. And with that in mind, you have to try to figure out what is necessary for me to spend CP on and what isn't necessary for me to spend CP on, so that I've got enough CP to spend on the things that are necessary. So, when I'm bringing in a unit, do I need them to be an additional D6 inches closer to to make the charge in, or do I have enough buffs on that unit that they're probably going to be able to do it? So, are they from the Brood Surge Deliverance so that they've got rerolls to their charges? Is that going to be enough? They've got +1 because they're 4-armed Emperor. Is that going to be enough? Are they with the Anointed Throng so they've got +1 inch to their charge? Is that enough? All of these things, you're asking yourself these questions and trying to do the math and trying to figure it out. And you have to do it on the fly while your opponent is trying to kill you. And that becomes very difficult. And I think that's part of why people are there's a lot of people out there that are talking about the Genestealer cult not being super effective and not being super strong, or a lot of people saying that like they need to have allies in order to be effective. And to me, I don't agree. I don't think they need allies. I think they've got all the tools and all the answers that they need to be effective within their own book. And with that said, though, it takes a lot of thinking in list creation. It takes a lot of planning ahead of time, and it takes a lot of mental acuity during the tournament and during the games to be able to keep things straight and keep things in mind so that you don't end up making a mistake that puts you behind the 8 ball that's hard to get out. Because with the Genestealer cult, once you're behind the 8 ball with the Genestealer cult, it becomes very difficult to claw your way back, because they die super easy, and if you make a mistake, you can get punished super hard because of that mistake. They die super easy, they die fast. There's a fair amount of them, but at the same time, it becomes very difficult to try to keep them together. So, like, with orcs, as long as you've got their leadership is how many models are in the unit. That's not the same for these guys. There's ways to make them. If you got a near patriarchs, they're gonna auto pass their morale test, which is pretty awesome. But it becomes hard. It's literally one unit. It's one HQ unit that you can only take one of per detachment. That allows you to do that, versus Tyranids, where every single synapse creature basically provides you with that bonus to not fail morale tests, or with orcs, it's every single orc unit is getting is going to be considered, its leadership is the number of models in that unit, or even in units next to them. So as long as if you've got two 30-man units next to each other, odds are your shooting's not going to be able to take them both down to a point where they're going to start failing leadership. These guys very easily can. They've got a high leadership. It's higher. That's the Brood Brother benefit, is a +1 to leadership. And, the leaders, they basically have Space Marine leadership, except for like the Patriarch, who's got leadership 10, and Pure Strains, who have leadership 9. But it becomes very interesting to see what you can do. There's also the issue with the different cult creeds that you can take, that they've got. You have to ask yourself when you're making this list, what stratagems do I want access to, and what do I want them to be able to do? Because Twisted Helix is super beneficial when you're in combat, but you need to get in combat, and Genestealer Cult can't trudge across the table and get into combat. They're not super fast. Pure Strains are, but they don't get the benefit of Cult Creed, so that's not helpful. They're not super fast, so they're not going to be able to trudge across the table. What they're going to be doing is they're going to come in from Deep Strike. And the best way to help guarantee that they're going to get into those charges from Deep Strike is by taking them with a Cult Creed that gives them the +1. Forearmed Emperor gives them +1 to charge after they've dropped in. And you look at that and you go, okay, well, that's how I get them into combat, but then I wish that they were Twisted Helix to give them the +1 strength during combat. What do I do? How do you play this? And it becomes, there's no answer. There's no solid answer to that. And I think that you look at all the different ways that you can buff. And that's the thing, is that the army is all about the buffs. All about the buffs. You've got different units that can pick out and help them do better. So you've got the Primus, who can give, who points out an enemy unit when he drops in, and your other guys within 6 inches of him get like a, I think, +1 to hit, or +1 to something like that. There's or reroll maybe wounds or hits or something like that. You've got the Jackal Alphys, who can point at a unit and basically go, that's my target, and gives all units within 6 inches, and bikers within 12 inches, I think, +1 to hit or +1 to wound, something like that. You've got the Clamavis giving +1 to charges and +1 to leadership. You've got all sorts of buffs. It's all about synergies with all of these different armies. Patriarchs giving them fearless, all of these things. It's all about these synergies and keeping them together, but that becomes very difficult to dispatch on an entire table's worth of targets. So if your opponent is all in one corner, it becomes a lot easier on you, because you can just group everything together. So you're getting fearless from your patriarch, you get +1 charge from your clamavist, you're getting +1 you're getting +1 to hit from the primus, and +1 to reroll hit rolls with him because of when he chooses the target. You're getting them all together, and they're all in the same place going after that one target. So if your opponent's castling up, it becomes easier for you to kind of get at them. But then beyond that, you have other units that are, but if they start to spread out and they've got them over across an entire table, what do you do? Because the point is, you would like to have one of your 20-man squads jumping in over here to go after these guys, another 20-man squad to jump in over there and go after these guys. But then your support staff, who's going to help them get into those combats, be effective in those combats, have to be splitting their attention. It becomes hard to figure that out. So then you start thinking about keeping units in reserves until turn 3 so that that the first squad can go in, do its thing, probably get wiped out the next turn, and then the next squad comes in and they drop in near the other support staff to try to help them that way. And it becomes difficult keeping that all together and in mind while they're doing it. And that's where I think a lot of the disappointment and the confusions come in with people, is that you look in the book and you look at this thing and you go, wow, Mental Onslaught is incredible. It can just kill a knight. And it's like, yes, that's really cool. But then when you try to depend upon that, you're dependent upon a psychic test going off. You're dependent upon your ability to not roll a 1 again and again and again like I do. You're trying to make sure that it can't get denied. And all of this is dependent upon things that are out of your control. And the second you're making a strategy that's out of your control, you're in trouble. That's what it comes down to. You're in trouble. So you look at that and you go, yeah, it's super effective. But then also you run into like an orc horde, a green tide, or you run into a demon spam list, and all of a sudden you're like, well, killing one model isn't as helpful for me anymore. Trying to make sure that I can get them up there and to do what I need to do, it's not as dependable as it used to be. So you sit back and you go, well, that's not great, So you have that situation that you're faced with, and you look at the different things. So it's like, oh, +1 to charge is great. It's like, yes, but the fact is that it's only within 6 inches of them. So if you want that clamavist to help that one unit, yeah, that's super effective. But now you've dedicated yourself to that point because they can only move 6 inches, and that aura they can't just sit in a truck and let that aura go out from them and be able to move across the table where they need to go. It's only one model that's giving that bonus to the units that are charging in there. So if you've got a tight, close, target that you're going into, like a castle, yeah, it could be super effective. But if they spread out, if they've got effective targets and units that are doing a whole lot of damage all across the table, suddenly now it's not as great as it had been, because your attention needs to be spread in order to do well in these battles and do well in these games. And that one unit is not going to be able to do that for you. So where do they sit? With all of this said, where do they sit? To be frank, I think they sit in the competitive end of the spectrum. They've got the tools there that they can do different things that are super effective and are super strong and can really hurt the enemy. They've got some weaknesses that are easy to exploit. If you got flyers, you're going to be hurting against, the Genestealer Cult's going to be hurting against you. If you can shut down psychic, you're going to really do a number on the Genestealer Cult. If you've got ways to just put mass amounts of fire onto them, they're going to fall apart like tissue paper. So there are ways to counter them, which is why I don't think that they're OP. I don't think that they're, that they need to be nerfed. I don't think any of that is true. I think that they are strong. I think that they can be effective, but I think it's going to take a lot of work to make them do what they do. And Juice getting to final table, that's as much a testament to him as a player as it is to the Genestealer Cult book and Codex doing what it's doing. Because it's going to take a lot of thinking, a lot of planning, a lot of practice, and a lot to keep in mind while you're actually playing the game for them to be as effective as they can be. And you can say that about any army, but these guys especially, it becomes hard to really do what they need to do and keep that all in mind, because a lot of it also depends upon reacting to your opponent. And if you've got a gunline army and you've got like a Castellan and you've got a guard army that's just is massive amounts of tanks, or you've got a Tau army with gunline, what you're doing each game when you drop them in there. Things change, obviously, every time things change, but you place them, they're going to shoot from where they're at, and that's the plan. That's what they're going to do. With a Genestealer Cult army, like any other really assault-heavy army, you're dependent upon how your opponent deploys their forces, and more so than say than certain other assault forces, like an orc or a demon army, where they can just kind of put them on the table and then either march them across to jump them across, or whatever they're doing. You've got a better idea of what you're going to happen. Genestealer Cult are coming out of Underground. That's where they're effective. Coming out of Underground, using the different stratagems they have to get closer, to try to get more of a guaranteed charge out of Underground, but they're still sitting there waiting until turn 2, at least until turn 2, before they can start doing what they're going to do. So you have to be able to stay on the board turn 1 and not get shot off the board. You need to be able to have spaces cleared so that your units can come in. And all of this, again, is dependent upon how your opponent reacts, how your opponent plays it out. Do they get very aggressive and make it difficult for you to respond? Do they hold back and get very defensive, which makes it hard for you to get where you need to? Or do they do something in the middle, which spreads you out and leaves you with questions as to what unit you're bringing in when? All of these things are dependent upon not just the list that you're going up against, but also the player that you're going up against. And all of this requires you to think and be super present in what's happening and be very aware of everything that's going on the table. And that's tough, especially after a long day of playing the game. It's tough. And that's why I don't think that these guys are going to be insta-wins. I don't necessarily think that you're going to see thousands of Genestealer Cult lists at the top of every GT. But I think you will see a handful, one or two, at the top of each of these GTs, with players that have put in the time to learn the armies, that have put in the time to learn the rules, have put in the time to learn the tactics, and that are willing to put in the mental effort that it takes to play them effectively during a tournament. Because they have the tools to do it. You just have to be able to see how they're going to work and how they're going to be effective for that. So that's what it comes down to. They're a tough army. They're going to be a very difficult army to play effectively. I think they're going to be a very difficult army to figure out lists that are going to be consistently effective. And at the end of the day, because of all that, I don't think that you're going to see them be too much of a problem to... I don't think they're going to be quite as meta shaking as a lot of people kind of thought they may have when they first came out, because of all the different things that they can do. I think putting it all together is a lot more difficult, and because of that, it requires a certain player, it requires a certain amount of effort put into them to really be meta shaking. And when they all comes together, it can be. So you get, a player like Juice, who has, dozens of games under his belt, that he put in the effort and the time to learn the army, to learn the list, to learn what he needed to do with them. And then he's able to go into Adepticon and kick butt and get to the top table. And that's going to happen. You're going to see those players that want to put in the effort, want to put in the time to make it all happen and put in the practice, and are willing to adjust and figure out how things change going forward. But you're not going to see thousands of people playing it. So you're not going to see... It's not going to be like a Castellan. You're not going to see 1,000 Genestealer Cults on the table like you saw Castellans on the table when Castellan started to get hot. You're not going to see 1,000... you're not going to see 1,000 acolytes just swamping tournaments like you saw Dark Reapers swamping tournaments, because they require a lot more effort and thought to make them work effectively. And because of that, it takes a certain person that's going to want to do that. So that's what I see. Let me know what you think, though. Do you disagree? Do you agree? Is there something else that you know about, or you think that really is worth discussing about it? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to keep it coming. And like I said, I'm still trying to figure this all out. I've got a list due, I think, today for Warzone Gigabytes, and I have no idea what I want to do. So I'm trying to figure it all out, trying to put it all together, and it's tough. It's very tough to try to figure it all out, like I've talked about previously. And I'm going to find something that it's fun to play with, but that I think can be effective and utilize all the different tricks that the Genestealer Cult do, because that's what's fun with them, is that, you know, is putting down blips, is dropping out of deep strike, out of the underground, popping out of the sewers. All that's fun, and I think it's gonna. There's ways to play with them. They're super cool, and aesthetically, they're just such a cool looking army with all their weird alien stuff, but also kind of human, quasi-human stuff. It's fun. I think it's gonna be great. So let me know down in the comments what you think about it. And again, you know, thank you to everyone who supports this channel, even just watching this video, liking this video, sharing this video, all of that, super helpful in growing the channel and going where it's going. And thank you to all my Patreons who help me out. If you want to help support the channel, you can do so. The link is in the description below. There's also links to my merch page, where if you want t-shirts like I spend CP to reroll ones into ones, you can pick that up in the merch store as well. So thank you guys all for everything you've done for me, and I really appreciate all of it. So I hope you guys have all enjoyed it. I certainly have. I have been Phil the Glacial Geek as always, and until next time, have fun.